couple of weeks, someone with an existing relationship with Nick Caserio became available. That, of course, is Coach Brian Flores, who was fired on Monday in a surprise move by the Miami Dolphins. I would anticipate that the Texans are going to run a targeted search here. They are going to move swiftly. Certainly, Flores is one name to consider here as potentially the next coach, again, of the Houston Texans.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It was Championship Sunday. It's been and gone. The head coach cycle is returning, and the Texans seem a little closer anyway this week. It may seem by the second round of interviews, but to talk all that through with us from the lead Houston, it's Harley Dugan. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. I'm honored to be on here, man. I never knew that I would ever be a guest anywhere on a podcast, let alone from the Great British. I mean, come on, man. This is awesome. This is an honor to me. I never knew this was ever possible. So yeah, I appreciate you reaching out.
No, thank you for the time. Wouldn't be able to do this without everybody being so gracious of their time. So no, the honor is all mine on this end. And we're trying to make a little bit sense of it all. I suppose when you're kind of in a place where we are right now as a ball club, you kind of look up at the final weeks of the season. It seems quite daunting, I think, in many senses when you see some, the elite kind of levels of squads, quality they've got it, at all positions in some cases, not all, but and some elite signal callers as well, and some, superior coaching than what we've been used to. But what did you take away from Sunday's games then, in terms of obviously the early AFC one was a turnaround, and the NFC probably went as expected?
Yeah, man, that was fun. That was absolutely fun. We just came off of what a roller coaster ride from the week before it. And those games were absolutely some of the best games we've ever seen as football fans. And AFC championship weekend, AFC, NFC was fun, man. Bengals, Chiefs are up 21-3 at one point. Bengals come all the way back. And wow, man, that Bengals team, they are on a roll. They are hot. They're going into Super Bowl weekend, going to face the Rams, which, again, another awesome game was the Rams game. And like you said, that was pretty much expected. I had the Rams winning, but the Niners, gave them a battle. And again, Kyle Shanahan in the fourth quarter doesn't come up again, a little short, gets outscored 13-0 in the fourth quarter by the Rams. So, man, Bengals, Rams going into the Super Bowl championship weekend, fun. What does this do for the Texans? Texans got to, again, like I've been saying in all my videos, this is at minimum 2-year plan to maximum worst case scenario 4 or 5 years where, you get down there. So look, man, if you can translate any type of the success that the Bengals have done with, they had some rough years, 2 rough years with Zach Taylor, and now the promised land into this year. Look, it all starts. They got a quarterback in Joe Burrow. That's very helpful. The Texans, I believe, are going to go on a different path than the Bengals. So, but overall, championship weekend, fun as hell.
Yeah, I kept watching the game on Sunday night, the first one certainly, and I just kept going back to in my head a lot of times. All of us, a team that, up front in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, deeply flawed, but they could run it some. Kind of reminded me of the sort of 2017, 2018 Texans when number 4 burst onto the scene and just kind of, and if you hadn't got that ACL, you never know, that could have been us. That's what I kept thinking back to. And just a team that, had issues on defense, weren't a complete unit on either side of the ball, but just had one transcendent talent that was on the rise, again, albeit coming back from an injury. But I think it just shows you what it means, not that anybody should ever be kind of confused by that fact, but what it means to have a guy at that position that can, lead your team in so many ways and make everybody else around them better. And, there's guys playing up front in that offensive line that probably should be playing in the league, but they've made it a Super Bowl. And I think that probably is a testament to how good Joe Burrow is. How good do you think he can be?
Yeah, I mean, hey, Watson was number 4 was a special player for us, and it is what it is at this point. You know, I don't. I'm never going to buy the rumors as of right now with Brian Flores and maybe Watson could come back. Maybe the door is still cracked. I'm not going to buy those rumors. I literally have to see it and to believe it, and maybe see him on the field to believe it. Like I got to be way in there. So I'm not going to believe any of those rumors until it happens. But I mean, Watson was a special player. I'm never going to be that fan that says, well, you know, he never did this and this and that. Well, I know who Watson was. And hey, yeah, did he have flaws? Sure. Did he have trouble reading a defense at times and picking up blitzes? Yeah, sure. But offensive line wasn't that great either, let's just say. So, I mean, that doesn't help much as well. So overall, Deshaun, you know, like I said, it is what it is, and it just feels like a rough patch. Just something to talk about when you mention Deshaun Watson. It just doesn't. It's tough for me to even put it in words that I never thought this was going to happen. You know.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the thing when you remind you of those games, you thought that should have been us at some point, or at least getting close, or at least being in the running. Because I think it showed you, you know, the Bengals showed that you don't have to necessarily, you know, have all the answers at every spot, you know, that, you know, and I think that's partly just, you know, with the new CBA, and I think, you know, all it did was erode the middle class of free agents and veteran guys. So actually, you know, when you think about it in real terms, if you're being brutally honest, probably the quality is down, and that's why you can rely on one guy at a position that can carry probably further ever than, you know, you should be, you know, by the laws of averages, you know, carries you further than this should be possible. But definitely, I think, you know, Burrow, you see him, and I think, you know, he's got the potential to have it all, and you know, health, luck, you know, some front office decisions around him, all the stuff that's gone against us. If you know, if that goes your way, then, you know, he could go on and rack up a number of rings. I think, you know, it'll be too much for them come the final game up front. I don't think you can equalize Aaron Donald, Von Miller with that front enough to get the points up. But you never know. You just never know, because the Bengals showed a great defense in the second half, and led by a guy who I was, you know, bitterly disappointed when he left was DJ Reader. So you got to be happy for a guy like that.
Yeah, totally, man. I'm extremely happy for DJ Reader. Huge. I'm happy that he got his money. I'm happy that he, you know, a team that the Bengals just seems like that's kind of like America's team right now. Like everyone's just like, yeah, let's go Bengals. You know, like let's have them beat the Chiefs. But yeah, totally happy for DJ Reader. All salute to him.
That's it. And I think you can't begrudge a team that's never won a playoff game since 1988, and then finally get there and take it the whole hog, because, you know, and you go back to us again. I think when you see all those, you know, when you went up to Baltimore in 2011, when you crashed out in New England in 2012, you know, those teams are probably good enough in some years to go the whole hog. But then you see a team like that come in and roar in and you know, and captivate a lot of, you know, sports fans and why you watch sport in general, because in theory anything's possible, and that's why you play the games. But in terms of their development, I know a lot of people have said, you know, they went from 4 wins to the Super Bowl, and that's not quite completely true, because Burrow was injured. They would have won more games if Burrow had been there, and they wouldn't have got to the Super Bowl with Burrow probably last year without all those free agents on the back end and up front on their defense. But from that sort of maturation process, you've seen probably 3 years in real terms with the new head coach, who, you know, has surprised many because it didn't look good for the first 18 months or so. But a 3-year window there. Is there anything the Texans you think can learn from dare I say it, Cincinnati? It's not a sentence I thought I'd be saying.
Yeah, and you know, any takeaways you can grab from Cincinnati right away. I mean, 3-year window, like you said. First year you got David Coley. Okay, do we even count that year? I'm not going to. It just 1 year done. I think this was just let me just see what I can get from the free agents. He signed about 30 to 50 free agents on a 1-year deal. Keep the guys that do well. Okay, what can you take from the Bengals to the Texans? Obviously, this is going to be different because you don't have a quarterback as of now in terms of Joe Burrow. I think Davis Mills is someone that is helpful for you in this rebuild process if he turns out to be one of these really good quarterbacks. I don't need him to be great, as long as he's really good. And we've seen it before with Matt Schaub in 2011, 2012, where Schaub in the surrounding pieces were great and made Schaub better than what he possibly was. And there's no discredit to Schaub. This man threw 5,000 yards. Okay. But like, let's I'm 537 yards, excuse me, in a game. But going back to that, the Bengals overall, they signed some veteran pieces. They got a DJ Reader. They get a Trey Hendrickson. They build the team. They got Jesse Bates for a few years ago now, and is literally the veteran leader. Damn good safety, by the way. Let's give some respect to Jesse Bates, not getting his deserved respect from the NFL. I hope he finally gets it. Von Bell, another veteran signing that's helped out a lot for them, causes a lot of turnovers. And then you get the draft picks right. You get some of these, a T. Higgins it kind of hurts that he got injured from college, comes with the Bengals, and he kind of gets hurt again. This year, whoa, this guy comes out of nowhere. No, this guy was projected to be a first-round pick whenever he was supposed to come out. Jamar Chase, him or Sewell. I think they got that one right. Yeah, Joe Burrow's running for his life at times, but, hey, I'll take the Super Bowl over him running over his life. We'll figure out the offensive line when we get there. The Bengals are nowhere near a complete team yet, but veteran free agent signings, getting these late draft round picks, early to late draft picks, they're hitting them on the mark. Player development, which we haven't seen from the Texans, is player development. And it always helps to have a quarterback. And I hope Davis Mills can become, not Joe Burrow, like I said, something good to great surrounding parts. That's what the Texans can try to take away from this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose when you have the benefit of a quarterback who's on a rookie deal, who you believe you can win with, it allows you to probably, and you think in the grand scale of things, if you're talking, from a purely analytical point of view, did they overpay for, Trey Hendrickson? Did they overpay for DJ Reader? Did a couple of those other guys like Mike Hilton and stuff on the back end probably get the richer deals than they would have elsewhere? Yeah, they did, but I suppose that's just if you're willing to spend in free agency, that's what you have to do to get guys, because ultimately the highest bidder 9 times out of 10 wins the race to get the deal signed, and it's not necessarily all of us down to fit and down to kind of sporting kind of chances of success. Now that's come together in quite a kind of misfit kind of shape and way, and then they put on a hell of a performance. I don't know if something happened to Mahomes, and I think that a team that good to only win one Super Bowl in that 4-year span is probably an underachievement, I would think. But I think, that's a good problem to have, what you do for those sets of problems. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting week. You saw it again as well, just touching that Watson thing. You saw that the amount of value that the 49ers put in trading up, basically three years worth of first round picks to get somebody to replace a guy who takes you to, one game away from his second Super Bowl in 4 years or 3 years. And that's probably just testament to the depth of their squad and, some of the quality they've got, particularly on the defensive side of the ball up front. So, you can get there in many ways, I suppose, and there's many paths it takes. But it was interesting learning from that, I thought. Another thing that takes many paths, I think, to find your way there is a head coach. And the Texans are definitely, embattled in a search right now that's taken on many different philosophies from a kind of interesting selection of candidates. And I thought, just before we went into the different candidates, and I heard this argument put up by Michael Lombardi, always former Patriots and Raiders, GM, front office exec type. And he talked about this a couple of times recently. I've seen him on various platforms talking about the devaluation of a head coach, and actually that traditional role of the commander in chief on the battlefield every Sunday is kind of being diminished in some aspects. And I think it's pertinent to the Texans as well. There's been a lot made about Nick Caserio being on the headset. And I heard Mike Lombardi talk yesterday about that, and he said that when you get to a certain point, you need to differentiate yourself from the rest of the staff. You are the boss now. So necessarily being on the headset, doing all that kind of stuff is not necessarily a good thing. Even though you've done it your whole career, you're now in a different job, so you need to act differently. And I think it's pertinent to the Texans as well in terms of the way I've described Caserio as overbearing. But what do you think of Caserio up to this point, Harley? And what do you think about how his role and others in the league are starting to change that head coach role, the way it's been traditionally viewed?
Yeah, so I'll start with Caserio, and so far, I'm kind of excited so far. Being handcuffed into this draft process and grabbing guys like a Nico Collins, Brevin Jordan, Roy Lopez, who is a starter pretty much for the rest of the year. Nico and Brevin, like I mentioned earlier, have the potential to be something really good for this Texans team. Garrett Wallow even got on the field and at times had a few splash plays. I think he could be possibly something, has some potential, more or less of a specials team guy, but who knows? This is still young into his career. You never know how he can obviously translate. And then the biggest one is Davis Mills. His developmental process is going to be huge on Nick Caserio, but I mean, so far, just grading year one, I think he did a pretty splendid job overall without a first or second round pick. So with that being said, now you mentioned the headset thing. I think it's just overblown a little bit. I really do. And I believe, hey, you got David Coley as your head coach. This guy wasn't supposed to be a head coach. There's a reason why he was a positional coach for many, many years. And Nick Caserio has had this kind of headset power, for lack of a better term. He's had it since New England. And yep. I'm not saying he's Belichick how to do things, but Bill Belichick didn't seem to have a problem with it. And this guy has 7 rings to say there is a problem with it. So, it is what it is. I just think it's overblown. I think it's the incompetence of David Coley at the end of the day as to reason why Nick Caserio was probably more on the headset a little bit more than other coaches. If he gets somebody like a Brian Flores, there's a lot more trust there. There's a lot more competency there. Obviously, they have a connection between each other, and he knows what he's getting into as well. If you're Brian Flores, as well as a Kevin O'Connell, who was drafted by the Patriots, he knows what he's going to be getting into. And so, if a head coach, if I'm a head coach, I don't want the GM on the headset telling me what to do, Yeah. But if I have a connection with him and I know who he is, then why am I going to get mad if I already know exactly who this guy is? I know what he's done in New England. I have a relationship with him. Not necessarily I'm going to listen to him all the time, but if he's going to say, hey, I think you need to take a timeout here, Brian Flores, if Brian Flores says, no, I don't think so. It's not like Nick Caserio and him are going to have a shouting match. I don't believe so. That's what I believe. And it's just my opinion, but Nick Caserio, I think overall has done a solid job for what he has been with for this Texans team. Again, remember they were in salary cap hell from the get-go. As soon as he got here, no Deshaun Watson anymore, trying to get the trade situation with him fixed. There's a lot of problems with this team, a lot more than I think we've kind of forgotten now. Let's be real. Yeah. Nick Caserio has done a pretty solid job so far.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I suppose, many would view it if you are a competent head coach or in any job, it's a bit of micromanagement that's probably, and I don't see, what stops him hiring somebody that he trusts, a younger guy or somebody to take that role and on a game day. Because I think just go back to an optics point of view, I think, this organization continues to be different. And they've not been successful by being different. Therefore, you will attract criticism by definition. So it seems a kind of a strange one in that sense, I think. And as well, it goes back, and the word culture was brought up a lot of times last year. And actually, Caserio's been the voice of the team, not the head coach. The culture has been, placed, guys getting cut through the mid-season, guys being let go, guys being traded off, or failed trades, being cut bait very quickly, all this kind of stuff about culture and about the fit and about all this kind of stuff. And actually, in prior years or prior, traditional views, it was the head coach that set that. But that's very much coming from GM, and it's not going to be an equal relationship when, with whoever this head coach comes in. They will know they are very much second fiddle to Caserio in the way he wants to do it. Now, will he amenable? Will he be? I'm sure he'll listen. I'm sure he'll take advice and sometimes from the wrong people. We'll come on to that. But I think he's, I wonder, and Mike Lombardi's view of it was, you will not be successful if you don't let the head coach run a football team. And that's not saying he picks the players. That's not saying he chooses the draft picks. He doesn't get a final say on everything. But I think there's an element of having a football team unity on a Sunday. It's the 53 guys that are on the roster that are important and are looking to that. And I know Watson's comments were about, having a leader and following that leader, and that was what was needed. I think that's what needed in every football team. So if that role's diminished, and Charles Omenihu's comments, you could take them in context, out of context, but ultimately, when you've got a kind of strong relationship there, and that's not to say Caserio's incapable of that, but I think what we've seen up to this point is you've got to hope that the situation will dictate a change that won't be like this year. And hopefully got some better players to boot. But I think that's an interesting one. But when you look at Harley, when you look at the Texans list of candidates, if you think of Eberflus, somebody they spoke to last year, is hired in Chicago. Brian Dable, who's a guy who's got clear connections with Bob Lamont, the agent. They didn't speak to him, hired for the Giants. Weren't in any way, shape or form linked with Nathaniel Hackett. He was quickly hired at Denver. And Josh McDaniels, everybody thought he was going to be Heat, and then quite late on the process, doesn't interview for anybody else, takes the job with Ziegler in the front office in Las Vegas. So why do you think the Texans list of candidates has looked so different?
Yeah, man, that's a tough question, actually. I really thought that Brian Daboll, Pat's connection, Patriots connections, boom, that guy's going to be interviewed. Okay, not even touched. All right, next one. Brian Flores got immediately. I mean, as soon as Coley didn't even get to start the car, and Brian Flores is already on a Zoom call with Nick Caserio. I mean, so, Nathaniel Hackett, I thought somebody that should have been interviewed at least or requested, didn't really get it, So there's a few guys that have Patriots connections that Nick Caserio hasn't necessarily talked to, which I'm kind of not upset about. I kind of like the different young, all of these coaches are young that he's looked at, and Brian Flores, one of them, another one in Kevin O'Connell, but still has, both of those guys have Patriot connections. Jonathan Gannon, if you want to find a Patriot connection, was hired from Josh McDaniels to go to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
Then, of course, we know that McDaniels left.
Yeah.
Famously, Frank Reich comes in, says, I'm still going to keep the staff and tweak it a little bit, and he keeps Jonathan Gannon. So with that being said, McDaniels and Caserio are really good friends. Gannon's getting interviewed from other teams. McDaniels probably tells Caserio, hey, why don't you take a look at this guy? Okay, no problem. And from quote unquote, blows the doors open and blows the doors away and has a really good interview with the Texans and countless other teams as well. Gannon is another guy. So all of these guys have some sort of a Patriot connection. Then there is Josh McCown and the Hines Ward, but Hines Ward, I believe, is just let's dip a toe into the water and just see, what he is. And if he blew you away, I think you'd get another interview, but I just think it's nothing other than possibly a coaching staff hire, maybe a positional coach, or it's just an interview. Maybe they talk with his agent or something. So who knows? All I do know is last year you do interview, before Nick Caserio, you do interview the salary cap guy, Omar Khan from the Steelers. This year you interview another kind of Steelers connection with Hines Ward, something that was pretty interesting from the Texans' point of view. If, what are they trying to do? Or interviewing two guys from the Steelers previously, but, Josh McCown that's a tough pill to swallow for me. That's the only one. Yeah. And it's extremely tough, man. Extremely.
Yeah. Come back to that McCowan thought just briefly, but I think, everybody's kind of like quite, and you said, and I'm probably less high on Caserio's job he's done to this point, draft aside, than stuff. I think some of these salary cap moves have not been not been necessarily great. No more than Whitney Merciless, extending him, then cutting him, and then taking on more dead cap. It just makes no sense when that was an obvious one. But anyway, there's no point kind of going over the old stuff. As you said, it wasn't a clean slate. He's getting towards a clean slate this year, but again, he's sort of muddied his own one by all these restructures. So, so I think, getting this right, and you're probably back at 0.0 again, and I think he's going to have a lot of autonomy to go and do this. I think that the list looks very different, and that's fine. And we'll come on to one particular one there, but not a lot of it. I think when you look at the pool of candidates, it was much more narrow, and there have been a lot slower. And I don't know if that necessarily gives you a benefit in any way. But my thought of why this candidate list it looks the way it is because ultimately, Caserio hired Cully probably not through 100% of his own choice. And like you're saying, he was meddling because, I think he knew what he was walking into. And he probably regrets that choice because, allegedly Fraser would have been a far better option. Caldwell would have been a far better option also. So I think, there's an element there of regret, I think, that, you can't fix the past. But what I find interesting is I think that the situation that he finds himself in will inhibit the candidates, because if I'm an agent, I'm going to say to my head coaching, candidate, look, you might want to think twice about interviewing for that Houston job, or at least voice some reservations about it. When you look at objectively from a league-wide point of view, I think that's definitely played into it, and I think that's definitely kind of narrowed the candidates, perhaps not all the way through choice. And Caserio's always going to do things slightly differently and do it his own way. But I think some of that's been external factors that you've kind of brought in there. It's been very quiet as well. And I do think, and there's been some confusion about who's interviewed, who hasn't. Trying to read the tea leaves this year, there's been, a number of different candidates proposed. Gerard Mayo didn't even get an interview at any point. Ian Rappaport, who's got direct links to Caserio, is out there saying, name to watch. I used the clip before podcast a couple of weeks ago, wasn't even interviewed. So I think there's an element of kind of doing the business quietly, which I find an admirable quality. I think, leaking every step you make out to the media just for discussion or for your own benefit or whatever that is a good thing. But definitely there's been a particular preference to keep things quiet, and even and include, the Texans' own staff and that. Why do you think that is, Harley? Why do you think there's been a kind of quite a secrecy? Because I think, Denver showed clips of their interviews and we've been the complete opposite.
Yeah, I think simple as put it, it's the New England way. That's literally the answer to that. And Nick Caserio's been there forever, and that's just how it is. Everything's tight-lipped over in New England. Now coming over here, I like the there's nothing that of. Like, nobody knew as soon as Coley got fired, and all of a sudden, boom, Brian Flores is already Zoom called interview done. And I'm like, well, what? Huh? Like, we didn't even get a leak that it was requested.
Yeah.
That never even fell. The news dropped that he got interviewed via Zoom call. And that was just like, whoa, this is happening pretty fast. And then he's kind of steadied the horses a little bit, it seems like, until, yesterday, where you get a bury of freaking, oh my God, Kevin O'Connell. Cool. He actually did get interviewed instead of just requested. Brian Flores, another interview. Awesome. Jonathan Gannon. Cool. Oh, okay. All of a sudden, but it feels like the secrecy I don't mind. It just feels like, in terms of Texan fans, and I get it, I get this other side of the spectrum as to, do they know what they're doing? Why are they being so quiet? Are they going to do the wrong move? Are they going to do something wrong? I understand that mindset because, hell, the Texans, they haven't been doing a lot of great moves front office wise. But then I try to look at the other end of the spectrum. Well, let me try to put some trust into Nick Caserio. It's the first time we've had a competent GM, unlike B.O.B., and I hate to mention that name on here.
Well, yeah, I think that's it, innit? Because I think it's like, it's like anything in life. You go from a bad relationship to a good one. You're always going to view that new one in a far better, probably unobjective light, or a light of lack of objectivity, certainly, than you would just because of the past, and rather than actually what it is, brass tacks. We'll go into some of these candidates and try and kind of work out exactly what's going on, because I'm not sure. So hopefully you can help me. But I think the case for this is a lot of people. But I hope to hell that it's not him. And I think if it was him, it'd be a tough day for everybody to muster. But you're talking about some confusion kind of public or PR team release, and it just kind of gives a bland statement of discussion. I can guarantee I'd put a month's on my mortgage on who interfered with the press release to do that, because we all know he likes to dabble in media relations, much to certain media members' disdain. But that man's influence, again, you can't get away from it. It's certainly not in personnel, and that's clear. I mean, because I don't think he's got the knowledge to be involved in personnel. But there's definitely a lineage between Jack Easterby and Josh McCowan. Now, it's subsequently been reported, not really necessarily confirmed, but certainly been reported that they offered him some kind of role last year. He then chose to go back and watch his kids play high school ball. Fair enough. You probably missed a lot, 18 years in the league. Time to go and be a dad. Get that.
Yeah.
But you're not pretty, but to then kind of come all the way sudden, do a 180 next off season, and to be quoted by Tom Pelissero is all in, which I thought was interesting, because I think, how can you be all in? Surely anybody that wants to be in the coaching is given their life to it, because it's not just something you can just rock up and do. It's a lifestyle that puts, the game above, many aspects of that individual's life, particularly family. And so I struggle with the McCowan one, just from a point of he's never had a day's coaching, so therefore by definition, and that doesn't need to be a coordinator. That does not need to be in the pros. That could be that you could have been the best college assistant head coach or position coach or something, and you've done it for 7 or 8 years, just never quite found the right opportunity, and then you took it. But I think the McCowan thing just goes back to doing things differently, looking dysfunctional, and the damage that you can do as a ball club who's trying to build back right now, what damage you can do in league circles. And I think that's just a bit of tone deafness that I don't think Caserio cares about, because he said he's immune to pressure. But what did you make of the McCowan thing and all the kind of inferences that come with that?
You talked about the de-evaluation of a head coach. I think that's probably the furthest you go is Josh McCown, a guy with zero head coaching experience, zero coordinator experience, zero positional coach experience, just zero coaching experience whatsoever. I look at it in two ends of the spectrum, and I'm trying to gauge what Texans Twitter and fans and everyone that's trying to look into this, there's one end where you're going, awesome. He was a quarterback for 20 plus years. Backup quarterbacks usually have tendencies to become really good coaches, positional coaches, head coaches. We've seen it. I mean, Frank Wright with the Colts, not saying he's a great coach, but I mean, he did pretty well. He's done well so far. I don't believe the Carson Wentz projects really helped out this year too much. It's kind of been a roller coaster ride in terms of that. But there's far more other guys. Doug Peterson, who's won a Super Bowl, he was a former quarterback in this league. So I get that end of the spectrum. Maybe this is the gem in the hidden coal, maybe, and possibly as a pioneer for future players that retire and could potentially become a head coach. That's one end of the spectrum. And then you got the end of the spectrum that like 80% of the fans believe in. It's, what the hell are they doing? This is really bad. This is optics-wise, this is horrible. And you said it, Jack Easterby's lineage with Josh McCown. He also is really good friends with Brian Flores. Well, how come they're not talking about that? Well, because Brian Flores has coordinator experience, and he has head coaching.
2 winning seasons, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, he started from 5-11, 10-6, 9-8. Like, he was on a trajectory of an upward climb with the Dolphins. 5-11 shouldn't have even happened. They should have been 0-16. They were trying to tank for 2 of that year, and he got 5 wins out of nothing. A roster they traded and tried to get rid of. And so that is completely different than someone like Josh McCown, who we just saw last year. Like you said, he takes a year off. They did interview him, but he's like, you know what? I'm not all in. You're going to be a head coach of a football team. You're interviewing for a head coach of a football team, and you're going to tell me you're not all in? Like, this goes back to Dick Vermeil with the Rams. Like, Dick Vermeil was a former for the Eagles, then Rams, former head coach. He had to step away from the game of football because mentally crying so much and emotionally and mentally, head coach, opportunity took a toll on him and his family. He had to step away from the game for a while. Like, this isn't something you're just, in next 2 hours, you're like, you know what? I don't feel like it anymore. No, you know what? I'm all in, guys. This doesn't make no sense.
Yeah.
If you're going to have no problem in Josh McCown, if he wants to be, I don't even like it as a quarterback's coach, but I'll allow it. I'm more of the let him be an offensive analyst, pass game coordinator, offensive intern, get his foot in the door, and then if you see the necessary strides he makes, okay, cool. Sure. I don't have no problem in a young head coach. I don't have no problem in looking at a Mike McDaniel. I would love that. Texans, if you're hearing me, but that's not going to happen. But Josh McCown is nowhere near the level of even getting a head coaching interview or request. Like, it's disrespectful to me, to everyone else that's worked so hard in this league. And that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's right. I think he's 2 fingers up to the profession, and in years and years of grinding. And I think as well, it's like, how do you know? Like, and I said this last week, it's very, very different to be a guy who is sitting there giving friendly advice, has no real kind of, written down responsibilities to actually do everything and manage everything about a football team. In terms of, on the field personnel, 53 personalities plus practice squad plus coaches. And how do you get a coaching staff to respect that guy as well? I think when he's just say you're Lovie Smith, you've been in the game, what you'd give to be a head coach again. You probably thought at times, what was David Culley doing? How did this guy get the job? It was probably one of a few, opportunities he had to be a DC, if any. How do guys like that take that? And you saw James Camden leave yesterday. You never know what he thinks. It seems kind of strange. You probably thought he's probably a brand name or as close as you can get as an O-line coach, certainly endorsed by Aaron Rodgers. So, you would have thought most incoming coaches probably had would have a plan. So maybe he's not in that plan. But I struggle with the McCowan thing big time. And I think you'd really test the frail loyalties that you have left with a lot of people if you were to do that, because I was there at the Jets game, after Thanksgiving, and it was sad to see. It really was. Not a place that a city like this should ever be in, or even be any close to being in. And I think if you were to hire Josh McCowan, you've probably got a chance of prolonging that sort of game day feeling of complete flat deadness, void of any meaning. Look, does his resume of 18 years being a backup quarterback lead him to be a potentially good offensive coach? Absolutely it does. But and experience dies off. Experience counts for so much. There's a curve, right? And then ultimately capability kicks in. There's only so much you can learn in a job. So, he may spend 3 years learning, but he won't get 3 years to do this job. We don't have 3 years. We don't have 3 years. I certainly don't have 3 years of watching nothing again. That's for sure. One was hard enough. When you get hit with injuries, when you get hit with, bad years, they happen. But when you don't see any way out, I think that's where people start to lose faith. There has to be a path. And I don't think giving a first-time head coach is a path by any stretch.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't get it. I really don't. I understand that they're all close. They have connections. I get Jack Easterby wants him to get interviewed and whatever, and it's more so even getting his third interview in 2 years. Like, this is just, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm trying to fathom it, and I want to find the optimistic side of this. I can't grasp it. I can't.
Yeah, and look, he could run with the job and be the best coach of all time. Could absolutely. I mean, Dick Vermeil's a much kind of praised and treasured coach, I think, in the league. Celebrated for successes by a lot of people. But at the same time, I think there's you've got to kind of have a bit of awareness of where we are now, where we need to be. And I don't think McCowan's that fit. Now, that being said, I don't think this job on offer is necessarily the best job. You could argue it's probably, it's a toss-up between them and the Saints, arguably, and the Jags, because I just think the Jags will never get it right. And I saw I saw Albert Breer saying, if he was Trevor Lawrence, he might be thinking about doing a Watson. And would you blame him? Because they've kind of messed up the coaching staff. Now, the reason why I bring that up, Harley, is because they have not been able to speak to Kevin O'Connell this week, because after looking like they were going to hire Byron Leftwich, they then went another direction. They then looked to hire, speak to some older, more experienced, coaches. And it's not necessarily kind of taking the progress they'd like. They look like they're stuck in limbo if they want to go for McConnell. The reason why I bring that up is because the Texans wouldn't have been allowed to speak to him this week unless that was their second interview. Now, Aaron Wilson said that, and a guy who is incredibly close to Nick Caserio, if you ever hear them speak to one another, is Albert Breer. So they were all very much of the opinion it was the second interview with him. But then the Texans released that as a separate entity. They hadn't, given any information out for a week. Head coach tracker, the lot on the website, nothing new coming out. As we said, Caserio kept them very much in the dark. Then they have Brian Flores, which they have to have one minority candidate interview in person to satisfy the Rooney Rule. So that would have had to happen anyway, either him or Hines Ward. But we can dismiss that. I think, as he said, an agent maybe needed a favor. So it's hard to. It was certainly put by Albert Breer, who I kind of trust when it comes to texting and Caserio, that O'Connell, Jonathan Gannon, and Brian Flores had all had final interviews. If you're sitting there right now, what do you think is the likely outcome of this, assuming the doomsday scenario of McCowan does not materialize?
Yeah, we'll take that out of the fold. Hopefully that does not presume to happen, but overall, man, all these guys getting second interviews. What's really interesting is the Texans waiting as long as they have for Kevin O'Connell. Like that's pretty interesting to me. And I get, because he's in the playoffs and obviously now going to the Super Bowl, and I get that, but I felt like if they've had a decision already, well then why wait for O'Connell? And so I'm not saying that's they hired, but it's quite interesting to look at in terms of the Kevin O'Connell fans. I think it could be Brian Flores. I really do. There's the Patriots connections. They known each other. Him and Easterby have a connection. Him and Caserio have a connection. So, look, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Brian Flores, who I would want. I'm all into the Gannon or O'Connell. I really am. And I've gotten higher on Jonathan Gannon a lot more lately, especially doing more research on him. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Brian Flores. And I just, again, the connections, what he did with the Dolphins was pretty good, actually. Like I've already mentioned before, they were supposed to be a tank for 2 a year, and they get 5 wins. Go 5-11. Next year you go 10-6. The third year you go 9-8. My only problem with Brian Flores, and I had a video on my YouTube channel with a guy named Alex Dono. He does Five Reasons Sports, I believe is what it's called, for the Miami. He helps with the Miami Herald. He said that the biggest problem with Brian Flores was his coaching staff. Yeah. Like his 3 years there, different coaches, and it begs the question of, can he get along with the coaches? Some of those articles, not all of them are fake. Some of them got some type of smoke to it, my only problem is that, and it gives me, and I hate to say the name again, the second time in the podcast, but I'm going to do it. It gives me Bill O'Brien vibes of not as well coordinating with the other coaches on the staff. That's my only critique on Brian Flores. I mean, the biggest one is Jim Caldwell. He was there in 2019, I believe, and he leaves the Miami Dolphins for health reasons. Yeah. And if he has health reasons, okay. I look at it like Gary Kubiak, who had health reasons and took a step away from a moment. Jim Caldwell has health reasons, and then that same offseason is interviewing for head coaching positions. I thought you had health reasons, unless they're just extremely minor. Me trying to do more research on that, can't find nothing else other than just that quote. So that's weird.
Yeah. No, I if you were Caserio, right, and you're looking at this right now and you've just basically botched, you made a complete fuck up of your first ever hire and David Culley. There's no kind of two ways to shine it, right? But then I think so. from of these candidates, if the market has shrunk to the point where this is kind of your only option, Brian Flores does make sense, I think. And and people's and perception of O'Brien with all the autonomy he was given, which he should never have been. But some of his biggest flaws were his biggest strengths as well, and he was able to coach a team, beyond its, albeit the defense was good, but he coached, admirable results, not far off 500, but in his, 9-7 was his most common record, albeit the one 11, and ironically the 11-5 season wasn't enough, and that was to blow it up. So that's the issue. I think he got too much power. He was given too much power, and Brian Flores kind of had a similar. I went through a list of bullet points a couple of weeks ago, and like every single one of them, if you could just rotate the name out, Brian Flores or Bill O'Brien, very similar East Coast kind of alpha personalities. But again, I think a football team needs that. I think that you can't get away from the fact that you can have a smart guy like Mike McDaniels, but how many of those 53 are going to say, who's this nerd? Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the reality of a locker room of alpha athletes who, have been pandered to the entire life. They're not going to see things objectively. They're not necessarily going to, they may get there and they may win people over time, but actually that's the job for the coordinators. That's the job for the position coaches to get into the technicalities. The head coach is to set the direction, set the philosophy of how you want a team to play and what your culture want to be within your locker room. And I think a guy like Brian Flores does that, but you don't want to go back to days of old. However, I always go back, Harley, and think if Caserio had come in one of those times, I don't know if Bill O'Brien's still maybe here and we're a lot more successful and a lot less rash decisions are made. So could those two personalities mesh in a way that the synergy is a productive football team? You can't rule it out.
Yeah, man, that's a fun hypothetical to think about. As we remember, Nick Caserio would have been the GM here, and it just happened that the Texans had to screw it up, and Bill Belichick was like, oh, they're snooping in. Okay, call it in. And damn it. We miss out on Nick Caserio. And that ultimately leads to this flush down the toilet that we're still spiraling down into. And Nick Caserio is trying to unclog us out of it right now. And so if he was hired back then, wow, man, you still have Hopkins. That was certainly a fun duo between him and Deshaun Watson. I didn't want to trade DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, looking at it now, he's had a lot of injuries from now and then, but I'm taking Hopkins. I'll take him. No offense.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think it opened, you could do that. You could do this for hours on this team, right? But I always go back to that. Would that being the kind of counterbalance that we needed to, and if you see some of the moves Caserio's made, reasonably risky, albeit not with the same assets that O'Brien did, but did he take that as a model and did he discuss doing stuff like that with him? And was that an example of how he thought he could do it himself? And the execution showed he couldn't. But yeah, I go back to that point. I think, when you look at Gannon, I think he's got the perfect background. He's very similar. He could be, I tweeted out, he could be Caserio's cousin. He's from Ohio. They're from the same neck of the woods. Got a scouting and coaching background. He did 3 years from 2009 to 2011 and in St. Louis before they obviously made the move to LA. And there's definitely like a lot there to like. And I think could he be a leader of men? Could he set the direction? Absolutely. Could Kevin O'Connell? But he's only coached since 2015. So he's not hugely experienced, albeit, but he's got some great production out of guys. He's got a tune out of what's the quarterback that came out of Ohio State? I forget his name again. Haskins. He looked okay at times and then kind of faded away, but he got a tune out of Keenum. He was partly there for some of the Kirk Cousins stuff as well. So I keep thinking O'Connell's going to go with the Vikings because of that history. With Cousins and that system, and I think that just kind of if you're a first time GM like Mensa, I think he pronounced it is, then he's probably going to go that way. So yeah, I think it comes down to Flores and Gannon really, because I don't know, when you go back to that secrecy stuff, actually, of O'Connell, either you held that information back last week because you wanted to move quickly this week if they got through, or if you didn't get through, you were poised to do it. So whatever that first connection was, if it is a first step, we don't know. So either they've done that with intent, or he's not interested. I can't quite work out which one's which.
Yeah, man. If it's between Flores and Gannon, Like I've already broke down both head coaches and videos of mine, and Brian Flores. He has a pretty solid staff, pretty decent one. As long as I don't get George Godsey back in here,
Yeah.
that's what I do not want with the swiftness.
Yeah. I think
not
he'll be given his staff, though. I think Caserio will have a stronger hand than he ever would have done.
Yes.
And thinking,
Yes.
and I think for me, the Flores one is, will he come and accept Nick's caveats and how he wants to do it? And that's the big question, I think. And I don't even know if he's probably, well, I know he's interviewing for New Orleans today. So, there's a chance he could get offered that job because they probably want somebody. You probably can't give the post Sean Payton era a first time head coach. And I think if you bring back, so is it Brandon Allen or whatever the DC Dennis Allen, sorry. Then that's probably a risky move, and you kind of just, you probably got to start afresh. So, there's a chance he gets offered the job there. I think it comes down to Gannon because, and Flores because they don't have any other options. But do you think, can you see a scenario where they both need each other? Caserio needs a steady pair of hands, but then also probably Flores needs somebody who can kind of balance him out a little and see the bigger picture a little, like Caserio always talks about.
Yeah, the balancing act is certainly interesting. I mean, you can have Brian Flores, who, is somewhat, from what we've heard in articles and rumors, has had some pushback with coaches, players, Tua, and that article was all encompassing. So, whether or not some of these are true, there's definitely smoke, like I said. So if Nick Caserio can be that somewhat of a peacemaker kind of guy, hey, this is where Easterby comes in, right? He's the guy that's supposed to create peace, correct? But Nick and Brian Flores definitely, I think, can create a really good dynamic duo for the Texans, and it bodes well, even though I'm not entirely sold on the 3-4 transition. I do believe the players that we have currently, and if anybody we do keep, like a Malik Collins, who had a really good year, Kamu Grugier-Hill, who had a really good year, both of those guys fit great in a 4-3. You transition to a 3-4.
Yeah, might be obsolete. Yeah.
Ross Blacklock now starts obsolete. To become exactly Jonathan Grenard, who played in a 3-4.
Don't know if he can play an outside linebacker. Yeah, I know that's the issue, isn't it? Because that's probably, after all the character issues aside, and I call them character issues, we don't know if they're true. So you've got to caveat with that. A lot of kind of mudslinging goes on when people leave build bitter taste left in the mouth, still waiting on your payoff, probably going through the lawyers. So you go and talk to the media for, a little check just to keep you ticking over and kind of let loose a little on the tongue. But I think that's the big issue, isn't it? Is the secondary issue. Does that mean that they have to blow up? Because all those guys you said, that's right. The sort of the small silver linings on the defense that look promising, they might not fit. And Ross Blacklock maybe could be a 3-4 defensive end, but I don't know. It's certainly not good enough against the run. See, I wouldn't trust them. On first and second down, just like I don't trust them right now, defensive tackle. So yeah, you might have to start completely again on defense, which, is that a big deal in the grand scheme of things? No, because a lot of these guys we're talking about probably aren't going to be here by the time we're any good. So I don't get too upset about that. But I think, that is a big consideration, Harley. I think, and I suppose the biggest issue, I think, if it's not O'Connell, who do you bring in as offensive coordinator? Are you in the kind of very much keep the Pep Hamilton train? It seems like he wanted out, then all of a sudden it kind of twisted on his head. Then he was going to interview, declined to interview. So the amount of murmurings around that suggests he probably wants out. If you follow his career path, he's kind of moved around a lot. So I'm kind of struggling to see that staying. I know there was a report, somebody sent me one point saying he was staying, but that's the big thing, I think, for these two most likely candidates or two most hopeful candidates, would make sense, is who they bring in as offensive coordinator. Because if you're going to see what you got in Mills in year 2 and you've got a cheap guy in a 3rd round contract, you've then got a chance in 23 to throw money at the roster, or some of it sensibly, hopefully. But who comes in as DC? Do you have a kind of view on that and how you build that offensive scheme, or have you got even kind of the kind of scheme you want to see?
Yeah, so Pep Hamilton, like you said, is confusing to me. He's a guy that's bounced around a lot in this league. At one point he was coaching in the XFL. Yeah. He has a very interesting, journey in his career as a positional coach. But I would love to keep him here. I'd love to keep the continuity between him and Davis Mills. I think that's a really big reason as to the success and the growth and development that we've seen from Davis Mills. But going back to Stanford, so yeah, I would love to keep Pat Hamilton. I would love that. If Kevin O'Connell is, let's say, the head coach slash offensive coordinator guy, he could also. I've looked into the staff, and he could bring in a guy like Wes Phillips. Wes Phillips, who's, people know, son of Wade Phillips, grandson of Bun Phillips, Houston Legends. Okay, so Wes Phillips is definitely going to be a fan favorite for a lot of the diehard Texan fans slash Oiler fans. So yeah, that's a name to throw around. He's a tight ends coach currently. Other than that, though, he's got another guy that's more experienced in Aaron Cromer, who is a journeyman kind of offensive assistant, QB's coach slash offensive coordinator. He's 54 years old, unlike Wes Phillips, who's only 35 years old. So the difference there in age is certainly there. But offensively, Davis Mills is a vertical offense kind of guy. And when Tim Kelly had his vertical, when he showcased Davis Mills throwing vertically, that's when you saw a lot of the, whoa, yeah, this guy's got some talent now. This guy can go on the run a little bit and make the throw down the field. This guy can 3-step drop back and drop it in a bucket to Brandon Cooks over by the sideline against the 49ers. This is pretty interesting. He's grabbed some stuff. Now, obviously, we didn't see enough of it, and that's reasons to why Tim Kelly's gone. But I believe that if you highlight some of the vertical offense that Davis Mills has done, and if they do go West Coast offense, which we've seen have a ton of success in this league, we've seen tons of success. It's pretty much a kind of a really good basic plan of an offense, West Coast offense.
Yeah.
Fling it out, run the ball well, and just do your job. Make sure you don't make turnovers. Davis Mills, I think, can overall, in thinking into the future, I think he can do that successfully.
Yeah, I think so. And that's the thing. If you had the choice of all these three names that we've got, or the three that we're looking at right now, Kevin O'Connell's system or that proven system, if you think it was the two guys in the NFC and Brian Callahan's calling us is effectively a similar offense, if not, the same with some tweaks. That's got, so the two offenses that are in the Super Bowl come from that tree. It's proven, wherever it goes to be successful, it's probably the best fit for Davis Mills. So, ideally you want him or somebody, as he said, that can coach that kind of system. I don't think Pep Hamilton's necessarily tied to that. Bruce Arians kind of stuff that was run by Andrew Luck when he was there. I think the issue was it was a bit sort of kind of similar in the long concepts than it was to Bill O'Brien's, where it kind of took a lot of time to develop and play and basically killed Luck's career, I think. So you don't want that to happen to Davis Mills. I don't think he's got the frame to take it. But there's definitely got to be that system there. So I think for me, Gannon's probably the perfect fit. What they probably think they want, but maybe not what they need. I think O'Connell's probably the right offensive guy. And if you want a proper, bona fide, old school head coach, if Caserio can equalise them, it's Flores. What do you want to say, Harley, before we head out of here? How would you tee it up? A bit like that, or what's your view?
Yeah, man, I think that's not too bad. I enjoy that. I'm all in for Gannon. I really am. I've grown on Gannon a lot. When I first heard it till now, I've grown on him offensively. He could bring in somebody like a Clint Kubiak. That would be fun and interesting. If Vikings don't retain him.
Memory lane.
Obviously, Kubiak, that last name. If there's anything I would take from Gary Kubiak, it's his offense. He didn't have a great head coaching career here too much. He's the only coach where I could say that I could have gone to a Super Bowl with. But regardless, offensively, I'm taking it. Clint Kubiak, Davis Mills doing bootlegs, play actions, dumping it off to Brevin Jordan, similarly to Schaub doing the rollout to Owen Daniels, gives me very good memories and vibes that I want to manufacture again. And so that is extremely exciting. As long as there's no pick six, Schaub, we get touchdown 6 from Davis Mills, okay, and we get Brevin Jordan in the Brev zone, as Roy Lopez loves to say. That is exciting. So Clint Kubiak is a name linked to Jonathan Gannon. His defense, Mike Zimmer potentially is out there.
Yeah.
He has a connection with Jonathan Gannon going all the way back to 2007 with the Atlanta Falcons. So that is exciting to hear. Mike Zimmer's defense with the Vikings, successful. Defense with the Bengals when we whooped their ass in the playoffs, successful. So overall, Mike Zimmer has had success in this league, and I like his defense a little more than Lovie Smith. I'm not the highest on Lovie Smith. He's exceeded my expectations, but at the end of the day, I think Lovie's is a boom or bust defense. You're either going to get a touchdown on us or we're going to get a turnover. That's pretty much it.
That's it. Yeah,
Gannon is fun.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff will change slightly, and I definitely think Caserio, hopefully, he changes approach whoever one of these three guys, and that coaching staff evolves a bit more than it was kind of thrust upon David Culley. But certainly, I think whatever you get, I think, Harley, in the next couple of days, hopefully, I think season tickets are renewed or the first window to get a discount of your season tickets is Friday, the 4th of February. So you've got to think that that's going to play a little role because from what I've heard from somebody this week, sales ain't been good. And I don't expect them to be because they've not done anything this off-season to suggest we've taken any steps forward apart from, kind of get rid of a guy who obviously wasn't up to snuff. So, whatever guy you get in, he's got to be here for 2 to 3 years. You've got to let him, build a squad that's, that's at least serviceable on paper. And at that point, you can debate what coaching job he's done. But, until that point, you're kind of asking people to make a lot out of scrap. So hopefully this week we'll find something that'll take us a step forward to progress. Any final words before we shoot here, Harley?
I just want to say thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on this channel. I appreciate you reaching out to me. This is an honor for me. I've never really been a guest on anything. Never been a guest anywhere.
As I always say, if you need any time, you need anybody on to repay the favor, I'd love to do so. I'm always happy to help and talk Texans, kind of make a little sense of it all because it's never made much sense on the surface. No more so than this coaching staff. So hopefully we'll find a way. Hopefully at some point this week we will see, a step towards the future, and hopefully can galvanize some people in the divisions and the anger and all that kind of frustration we've seen can be put to bed. And we'll have a new head coach we can rally around and hopefully go and win some football games because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks to Harley for his time. If you've not checked out the weekly article on podcasttexans.com, managed to get myself going last 3 weeks out of a slumber in mid-season. And thank you again for listening. We'll catch you again, hopefully, to speak about a new head coach.